welcome. It's Chris from Christopher Holt Training, and welcome to this tutorial where we're going to be looking at back strengthening exercises, and we're going to look at 4 good, 2 bad and 1 ugly. Now the main aim of this is to explain the difference between good and bad back strengthening exercises, and we'll do that in the summary at the end where we'll summarize what we've talked about. But in the first 3 slides we're going to talk about, first of all, 4 good back strengthening exercises. Then we're going to look at 2 bad, and then we'll look at the 1 ugly, and then we'll obviously finish off with the summary as I mentioned. Now this information is useful for people not only with back problems, but also people that want to improve the health and the fitness of their core, albeit for just everyday life, for fitness goals, or for a certain sport that you want to play. Now, when it comes to sport, there are certain other nuances that need to be involved in it, but this is a good foundation to start with. You will need to build further on top of that for certain sports, but essentially, when we talk about the 4 good exercises, they are a good foundation to start with. And that's what we're talking about at the moment, is the foundation to the information and the foundation to good back strength, if you will. Yes, there are bits that we can build on top, but essentially we're talking about the foundation to start with. Now, before we get into that, just want to quickly do a quick bit of business and talk about my social media platforms. So if you want to come along there, like and follow, it'd be great to have you along. On Twitter, it's @ChristopherHole. On Facebook, it's Christopher Holt Training. And Instagram, it's Christopher Holt. So as I mentioned, please do come along, like and follow. It'd be great to have you there. Alternatively, come to the website where you can find out about my online training programs. If you follow the URL in the description, which is this one here, you can go straight to my Overcome Low Back Pain 12-week program, which is more than just an exercise and stretch program. It also contains workshops and tutorials that go around why you're doing what you're doing and how to do it. So when I work with people on a one-to-one basis in the gym, I share with them that information, not necessarily in a formal workshop form, but as we're doing certain exercises, I'm teaching them how to do the exercise correctly, what they need to be thinking about during the exercise, so on and so forth. So those programs are like having me there virtually, just in a slightly different form where you're given formal workshops and tutorials rather than just me in the gym. But you also get the 12-week program that progresses naturally as well, but you get all that information wrapped around it. So if you want to go there, please do have a scroll through the page, watch some of the videos, and just find out more about the course. If you want to enroll, it'd be great to have you there, great to have you on board. We get to interact through the online support system. So yeah, it'd be great to have you along and involved in the 12-week programs. But coming back to what we're talking about today is the back strengthening exercises. 4 good, 2 bad, 1 ugly. The 4 good back strengthening exercises are the plank, side plank, bridge, and bird dog. So they're not back muscle exercises that you might think are going to be back strengthening exercises, but they're core strengthening exercises. And it's the back that is supported by the core. The back is, in a sense, the ground floor to the core's foundation, if you will. So what we want to be doing is we want to be making these a mainstay within our workouts. Yes, we can progress them and they can take on slightly different forms, but essentially we want to be keeping these principles. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these bullet points, and then I'm going to explain sort of the why that we want to be doing these exercises. So first of all, it activates the rectus abdominis and the obliques without lumbar motion and encourages constant muscle activation. Now it's very similar for the side plank. It activates the quadratus lumborum, TVA and obliques, and again encourages a constant muscle activation. For the bridge, now this activates the gluteal group. And what this does, this encourages hip extension and a neutral lumbar posture. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then finally, the bird dog activates lumbar extensors and thoracic extensors, and is enhanced by abdominal bracing. So one of the points that is sort of common through these 4 exercises is without lumbar motion. So with the plank, we don't have lumbar motion. Same with the side plank. Although we are extending the hips, we don't have any lumbar motion, hence the neutral lumbar posture. So when we're performing the bridge, what we can do is, instead of having arms across chest like you can see here, we might put one arm or one hand on the lower back, so we can feel if the lumbar spine is changing posture, if it's hyperextending. Because one of the things that I find when I'm working with a lot of people is when they go into this position, yes, they can extend the hip and lift the hip from the floor, maintain a straight line from knee, hip and shoulder. It's normally at the expense of an hyperextended lower back. And that's something that we want to avoid. So we want to be, number one, maintaining this without lumbar motion type idea. The second thing is we want to be working multiple muscles throughout each exercise. And as you'll notice, throughout these exercises, the muscles kind of overlap as we go round. And what they're doing is it's a big wraparound. So the whole core is all the way round. So you've got the rectus abdominis and the obliques on the front and side. You've got the obliques and the quadratus lumborum on the sort of front and side of the body. You've then got the gluteal group, which is sort of underneath the back. And then you've got the lumbar and thoracic extensors, which go up either side of the spine, if you will. So we're, in a sense, through these 4 exercises, covering a multiple amount of core muscles, which is going to allow us to build greater core strength than if we're just trying to single out one muscle at a time and sort of overtax that muscle. Because what we also get with this is reduced spine compression, or reduced compressive loads on the spine. They are still present, but they are less than the exercises that we're going to talk about. So what we want to be again focusing on is, without lumbar motion, multiple muscle activation, and the abdominal bracing principle, which we get through the bird dog, through the bridge, through the plank, and through the side plank. Now, to learn more about that, you can join the program, because within the program I have the workshops on each one of these exercises, which teaches you how to do all of these points and principles within each of these exercises, because it's not as sort of simple as a video like this than this can show. It's a live workshop with me up the front teaching these exercises, all the different regressions and progressions, all the different potential technique flaws, i.e. moving of the spine in the bridge, overextending in the spine for the bird dog, and not being in the right position and posture for the plank and the side plank. So it's very much being able to get these exercises right, to get the positions right, but also getting the mechanics of them right as well. So hopefully that's giving you a better idea of the good exercises to do, because what we're now going to do is look at the bad and the ugly ones. The 2 bad back strengthening exercises are sit-ups and leg raises. Now again, these aren't back muscle exercises. They are considered core exercises by certain parts of the industry, but there is a small corner of the industry which doesn't use these exercises, and I would be included in that. And some of the reasons why I don't use these exercises is, number one, the sit-ups. It activates rectus abdominis with a lumbar motion. Now, the lumbar motion increases the load on the intervertebral discs, but it also activates the psoas. Now, the psoas is your hip flexor, and that goes from each of your lumbar vertebrae through your pelvis and joins onto the front of your leg. Now, all of that combined, so the rectus abdominis with lumbar motion and the psoas, now these loads can squeeze the bent discs, nucleus, to the point that it bulges. Now, the most important word there is can. these loads can. It doesn't mean it will, because there are other factors, i.e. the sort of the genetics of the disc, so the size of the disc, the shape of the disc, so on and so forth. So it's not that you will get a herniated or bulging disc from it, but it increases your risk of that happening. And if you don't know the anatomy of your disc, then it's a good idea not to back that horse, if you will, because I could do sit-ups and crunches with certain clients of mine, but I don't know what the anatomy of their disc is like until they have an X-ray, an MRI scan on it, so it can definitively tell me what those what their disc is doing. So I'm just hedging my bets and saying, well, 80% of the population are going to experience back pain. I don't know what their anatomy's like until I get them X-rayed and MRI scanned, which most people either don't want to do or can't do. So I'm just hedging my bets, just taking those elements out of the equation and just focusing on the exercises that minimize that risk, i.e. the 4 that I showed you before, because they're minimizing the compression forces around the spine. Then we come on to leg raises. Now, leg raises, they activate the rectus abdominis, it should say without lumbar motion, or it should be without lumbar motion, because what we're just doing here is hip flexion. But what we get with the hip flexion is it activates the psoas with even higher spine compression. So what we are doing here, we are, in a sense, robbing Peter to pay Paul. So when I used to teach personal trainers, I would talk to them about the previous 4 exercises as good core strengthening exercises. What then would happen would be a lot of questions. Why aren't sit-ups in there? And I would explain why the sit-ups aren't there. They would also then, leg exercises, leg raises must be okay because we're not moving the spine. And that is in a sense true, but we're activating the psoas, which is increasing the compression on the spine. So where we are not moving the lumbar spine, we are increasing the compression on it with the activation or the extra activation of the psoas with the hip flexion. So what we want to be doing is either minimizing or eliminating these 2 exercises, because what they're doing is they're starting to yes, they might be strengthening certain muscles of the core, i.e. the rectus abdominis in the sit-up, but what they are starting to do is they're starting to affect or at the detriment of other tissues of the spine. And obviously here we've talked about the intervertebral discs. What we're going to talk about next in the ugly exercise is a further 2 tissues that are affected. So far with the bad exercises, we understand that it can stimulate and activate the muscles that we want it to, but it's at the expense of something else. Whereas the other 4 didn't have that, or didn't have as much of that. So what we're going to do now is talk about the ugly exercise. The one ugly back exercise is the first back muscle exercise, and it's a back extension. So again, like the sit-up, like the leg raises, they're very popular exercises in fitness, in the gym, with trainers, with coaches, but they're not necessarily the most effective exercises that could be done for this area of the body, be it core, be it low back pain, so on and so forth. So with regards to the back extension, it has over 6,000 newtons of compressive force. Now, this is almost double that of the sit-up and the leg raises. So this exercise, in a sense, it's twice as bad as the bad 2, if you will. What it does is it transfers load onto the facet joints. Now, the facet joints are another part of your vertebrae. So it's taking away from the musculature and affecting a different tissue of the body. And it also crushes the interspinosus ligament. So again, as we mentioned with the sit-ups and the leg raises, yes, it's activating the muscles of the lower back, but it's at the detriment to the facet joints and the ligaments of the spine. So far, we've looked at 3 exercises that are activating muscles that we potentially want to activate, but we've also got 3 different tissues that are being affected and being sort of negatively affected by doing these exercises. And as Dr. McGill goes on to say, is needless to say, this exercise is contraindicated for people at risk of back injury. This exercise should not be done in any form. So you've got one form, which is here, which is lifting arms and legs from the floor, but you've also got just lifting legs and just lifting arms. Now, what this means is, needless to say, this exercise is contraindicated for people at risk of lower back injury. How I interpret that is, one of the reasons that I eliminated a lot of these exercises was putting together not only that bit of information, but the fact that 80% of the Western population, which is a big stat, I don't know how accurate it is, but it's a lot of people. So 80% of the Western population will experience some form of low back pain in their life. So what that tells me is that 80% of the population are at risk of back injury for many different reasons. It partly could be because of a sedentary job. It partly could be because of repetitive movements. But what the last thing we want is, if they are already at risk just from a Western lifestyle of being sedentary, we don't then want to be taking them to a gym and putting excessive compressive forces on the spine, transferring load onto the discs, potentially squeezing the discs, putting extra load on facet joints and crushing ligaments. That's something that we don't want to be adding to a problem that's potentially already going to happen to them. So by using the first 4 exercises that I talked about, what we're starting to do is we're starting to remove some of those variables, or at least trying to reduce some of those variables, making it a lot more healthy for their spine. So we're helping people use their body correctly for the environment that they are in. Now, there is a time and a place to move the spine, and there is a time and a place to use, let's just say, not as effective exercises. But for most people in the population, they're unnecessary. So what we want to be thinking about is, what exercises are we doing and what exercises could we be doing instead? So what I'm going to do now is just quickly go through a quick summary of what we've talked about and summarize some of the principles of good and bad back strengthening exercises. To make sense of what we've talked about so far, I've just put together 3 bullet points for good back strengthening exercises and 3 bullet points for bad back strengthening exercises. Now, this is what we've talked about all the way through this tutorial. Number 1, they activate good back strengthening exercises activate muscles without lumbar motion. They encourage constant muscle activation, and they enhance abdominal bracing. So the plank, the side plank, the shoulder bridge, and the bird dog all do these 3 things. Now, all with this minimizes or reduces the compressive forces on the spine. They are still present, but they are reduced. And I'm talking about these from the perspective of a foundation. There is a place where you can start moving the spine, so you can have lumbar motion, and we have to understand where that place is. I'm not talking about that within this tutorial. I'm talking about this as a foundation that is built on top of, if that makes sense. So we want to build a strong foundation first, which is activating muscles without any lumbar motion, encouraging a constant muscle activation, and enhancing abdominal bracing. So if we can get those right first, it gives us a greater margin for error to start moving our lumbar spine and moving our spine. And when it comes to bad back strengthening exercises, it's activating muscles with lumbar motion. It activates muscles with the detriment of other tissues, i.e. the facet joints, the discs, and the ligaments of the spine, and they're increasing the compressive loads on the spine. So these are unnecessary compressive loads, because we can get the muscle activation that we want without the compressive load. So we're minimizing our risk in the future. What we aren't doing is getting the muscle activation and increasing the stress to the spine, because if the spine goes, the muscles won't. You won't be able to work the muscles. So in a sense, when the spine goes, your core strength will go and you'll have to rebuild again. So if we want to minimize risk of the spine going, then we want to activate muscles without lumbar motion, encourage constant muscle activation, and enhance abdominal bracing. So hopefully that's been helpful. If you want to learn more about that, come to Christopher Holt Training. I've got an Overcome Low Back Pain 12-week program, as I mentioned before, and I've also got a core strengthening program where you get all of the workshops, all the tutorials to teach you how to do these good back strengthening, good core strengthening exercises that will not only minimize risk of injury in the future, but also improve the fitness of your core as well. So if you want to find out, please do come along to the website, scroll down, have a read through the page, see what you think. If you like it, enroll. You get access through the online support system on there, so you'll be able to ask me questions, queries, and get more from the program in that way. So where it is an online program, you still get a sort of one-to-one touch to it as well. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from Christopher Holt Training. I'll speak to you in the next video.